Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending this international conference. Actually, you attending is probably the most important thing. I'd also like to thank Lurch Popsanim and Chunwan Fasher for their clear talks. In fact, they didn't leave me much to talk about. But anyway, I'll say something. Also, I'd like to thank everybody who organized this meeting. Sometimes we think very negative about this worldwide pandemic, but it does have a few positive qualities. And one of them is it's really expanded almost to the point of an explosion, everybody's ability and desire to get together on things like this, Zoom. So that's at least a little bit of an upside to the whole thing. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about Kwang, as everybody before me has. The Buddha, in his life, only talked about suffering and taking away suffering. So this suffering is created by something, and it ultimately leads to a great question. And that great question is, what am I? So the Buddha lived in very good circumstances, but one time he escaped the circumstances and he went out and he saw three things that really shocked him. And those three things are old age, sickness, and death. And of course, those three things are apply to us just as much today as they did 2,500 years ago. So actually, these three things are like our original teacher. So once you see them, then you have this, every human being has this bad feeling, you don't want to get old, like me. You don't want to get sick. That's why you don't like this pandemic, because it involves sickness and disability. And of course, you don't like death. But there's no avoiding them. So the Buddha saw that, you can see that, I can see that. So this is very, we might say in English, brutally simple. These three things are always with us, they're always hanging around, and you never know when they're going to strike. Am I going to live for 1 minute more? Am I going to finish this talk? Or am I going to hang around till I'm 120 years old, like Zhao Zhou, Zen Master? So you just don't know. So when he saw these three teachers, inside his mind appeared this big question. Well, then what am I actually? So we might associate ourselves with our body, might associate ourselves with our family, we might associate ourselves with our religion, our profession, our gender, our marital status, or lack of there, if we're a monk or a nun. So, but you'll notice that old age, sickness, and death remove those things. So then inside of the Buddha's mind appeared this great question. What in the heck am I? What am I? Why are we here? Where do we come from? So these are all natural questions that arise out of our experience of these three basic things that we all experience. So this basic question is primary in Buddhism, but it appears in all religions, all philosophies. It appears in our life maybe daily, right? So this big question is what led the Buddha to leave home and go to try to find the answer. So Buddhism is also about that, helping us to find the answer. And this helping takes many forms. So the helping or the search that Buddha did was he just left home and went ultimately just to sit under a tree and look inside. So basically all Buddhist techniques, and there are many of them and they developed over the years, point towards this very simple thing, just looking inside and finding the answer to the question. So that's what the Buddha did, and then boom, he has a kind of experience. So to me, it was always interesting. Buddha isn't reading a book or listening to a lecture. He's just looking inside of himself, and then he has a direct experience of his true nature and the answer to the question. So this experience of his is like the basis of Buddhist teaching. So one way to think about the sutras, or today we're talking about Kwang practicing, is it's all pointing towards or leading you to have a direct experience of what you actually are. So that's a little bit unusual, because some people think about the sutras as explaining something, but no, they're not explaining anything. All they're doing is pointing towards you having an experience. And the Kwang too is also interesting, because it's not explaining anything to you, obviously, because when you think about it, all you do is get a headache, right? So it's also a technique for allowing you to have a direct experience. So everything in Zen, and ultimately everything in Buddhism, is also about this direct experience. So I'm always talking about a banana, you know, so I can explain a banana, I can read a book to you about bananas, and I can even send you the video so you can watch the banana video. But in the end, you'll have to actually peel one and bite into it, and then you'll have the direct experience, and you say, oh yeah, that's what all that was about. Wow, great. Why did I spend the money on the video and the book when I could have just bitten into the banana, right? So that's what the Kwang is. So since the Buddha's time and long before, we've had all kinds of techniques for experiencing this, what we really are. And the Buddha is just a particular, the Buddha and the Buddha's teaching is just a particular form of telling us how we can directly experience what we actually are. And the purpose of that is to relieve suffering. So even the Kwang is about taking away suffering. And the taking away that suffering is based on a direct experience. So over the last 2,500 years, as Chung Wen-Fasher was talking about, we've developed many techniques, teaching styles, all kinds of things to help bring about this relief of suffering. So probably before, but most recently that we know of, the sixth patriarch, who died in about the year 713, wrote this thing called the Platform Sutra. And this is probably the first appearance of the notion of Kwang, although it's thought to have originated originally in Taoism. But it involves a kind of technique to allow you to experience letting go of your thinking and returning to just this moment and becoming one with this situation. Now that situation may be your daily life, you're washing dishes, driving a car, or kissing your wife, but it can also be a situation that is created by the Kwang, and then the kind of teaching method is for you to directly experience becoming one with that particular situation. So this points to something, our true self. So when the Buddha got enlightenment, he said, wow, this is great. Everybody already has it. Everybody already has Buddha nature. That means everybody already has the answer. But they don't know that. Because they don't know it, they suffer. So that's the purpose of the Kwang, is to allow you to experience the answer to that question, to directly experience your original Buddha nature. So traditionally there are 1,700 Kwangs. And originally there's just one Kwang, what are you? Even the famous Zen master Ikkyu said, forget about all those 1,700, there's only one, what are you? So that's the background. The background thing is there's only one, right? So, but just like in traditional Chinese medicine, if you have something wrong with you, they might stick in a lot of needles. I remember I went with Zen master Sung Sung to a acupuncturist, a Chinese, no, he's a Korean acupuncturist in New York City. And he stuck one needle into me, but he stuck about 100 needles into Zen Master Sung-san. So depending on the circumstances, you might have to stick in a few. Maybe you stick in 1,700, you know, to cure your problem. But the intention is all the same, and that is to have you get better. So the illness is suffering, and then how do you wake up from that, and how do you help the world? So Zen is very simple. It just means find your true self, which means wake up, and then help the world. Use that awake mind to help the world. So this is very simple, and that's also the Kwang's job. So it's, as Lurch Popeson said, it's not being attached to that question, not being attached to the Kwang, but letting the Kwang work on you so you can wake up. So today I was told I should talk about Matsu Dawi, and he's the Dharma heir of the sixth patriarch who wrote this Platform Sutra. He's 3 down from the sixth patriarch, so you might say he's the 8th patriarch. And he's famous for developing all these techniques like Chungwon hit you with a stick. So that's a kind of technique that originally come from him. So he used these shock techniques. And the thing that the shock technique does is it has you let go of your thinking for just a moment. Right? Some people say it takes away your thinking, but I think it's better to say that it allows you to let go of your thinking. So you experience your thinking going away when somebody hits you, right? Or somebody asks you a question you don't know the answer to. Then you think, oh, what? Mm-hmm. You know, so for just a moment, your thinking goes away. And at that moment, you experience what we call this don't know mind, because, well, you don't know the answer to the question. So actually, that's the Kwang's job, to give you a direct experience of this don't know mind. And then this don't know mind actually allows you to answer this question, which we call a Kwang. So Zen Master Sung-san took 2 different exchanges from Matsu and students and turned them into Kwangans by adding a question to them, right? So the question is a before thinking question. So that's kind of unusual, because usually when we think about questions, we think about them as thinking, you know, like, how do I get downtown, or where did I put my toothbrush, or how come the dog is barking outside? So we can think about that. And you might get an answer that way. Like your wife might tell you, well, the dog is barking because the postman just came, and he always barks when the postman came. And so then you think, oh yeah, that makes sense. So those are all thinking kinds of questions. But then there's a very important other kind of question. We call them, in the Quantum School of Zen, we call them before thinking questions. So this what am I is an example, the primary example of one of these before thinking questions. So a before thinking question is one that can't be answered for you sufficiently by lecturing you, or telling you to read this or look at that or listen to my talk or anybody's talk, but it's answered by returning to your before thinking mind, and then your intuitive self, your true self, will just naturally answer it. So this is very simple. In fact, Zen is very, very simple. In fact, it's before the opposites of simple and complicated. It's even before that. That's how brutally simple it is. So one time somebody asked me, well, why can't I answer that koan? I said, well, it's very simple. It's because the answer is too simple, right? So you're attached to some kind of idea about yourself, or the koan, or me asking you the question, or Zen, or whatever. So the human mind is kind of like Velcro, you know, it can stick to anything. So it even sticks to the teaching that wants you not to stick to anything, right? So that's why we use all these different techniques to create a situation where you let go of that and directly experience this moment, which is what you truly are. So Matsu one day was asked by a monk, what is Buddha? And he said, Buddha is mind and mind is Buddha. And it doesn't say much more about what happened after that, but that was interesting teaching. So mind is Buddha, Buddha is mind. Then a couple of days later, another monk came to him and asked him, what is Buddha? And he said, no mind, no Buddha. So that's interesting. One day he said the Buddha was mind, and the next day he said that Buddha was not mind. And in fact, he even went further than that. He says, no mind, no Buddha. So this is a kind of technique, a style of teaching present in Zen, and it originates with the sixth patriarch. If you want to read about it, you can read about it. It's in the last chapter of the Platform Sutra. But the technique actually is to, no matter what anybody says, you contradict it. And then that contradiction, like Lurch Pope's said, it kind of leads to a kind of dialogue. In this case, a dialogue which leads to don't know. So the first monk said, what is Buddha? He said, mind is Buddha, Buddha is mind. And the next time, the same question was asked, and he supposedly contradicted himself. So this kind of contradiction is actually pointing towards you having a direct experience. It's not about explaining anything. It actually doesn't even make any difference whether the explanation is correct or not. So hitting you with a stick, the way Lynchy was hit, doesn't explain anything to you, right? In fact, Wang Po almost beat him quite severely 3 different times before he went off to find a real teacher, right? And then when he found a real teacher, his name was Great Stupid said to him, well, why did Lynchy treat you with such grandmotherly kindness? You know, and then boom, he gets enlightenment. Because he finally experienced what he was questioning before. Right? So that's what we call enlightenment. Enlightenment is not special. In fact, it's not even enlightenment. It just means wake up just now. So that's the Kwang job. And even though there may be 1,700 of them, they're all just like I already mentioned, they're like these acupuncture needles. They're just sticking you here, there, and ouch, maybe you wake up. So those are just some of the kinds of techniques that we use within Zen to bring about a direct experience. But all the techniques in Zen are actually pointing towards you having a direct experience, even reading the sutras. So it's very interesting. This sixth patriarch, who's the founder of modern Zen style teaching, got enlightenment when he actually heard a line from the sutra, from the Diamond Sutra. And that line was, when thinking arises in your mind, don't attach to it. Then boom, he gets this realization, right? So that's interesting because it's not about, it's using actually reading a sutra and he gets enlightenment. And he didn't practice for 6 years like the Buddha. In fact, you know, he did no formal practicing before he heard that line. And here he is. He's the founder of modern Zen style teaching. So it's all about having this direct experience and not attaching to thinking or not thinking or answering or not answering, attaching to the teaching. Not attaching to the teaching doesn't have anything to do with that. It's before that. So this thinking is not good or bad. Reading the sutras is not good or bad. The problem is attachment. So when thinking arises in your mind, don't attach to it, right? That's the behind meaning of all these different styles of teaching, whether it's koans, reading sutras, or getting hit over the head by a stick. Don't attach to it. Let go of it and return to just now. So we call that just now mind. So every time you return to your just now mind, actually, that is enlightenment. It doesn't have mind. It doesn't have no mind. It doesn't have enlightenment. It doesn't have anything. It's only just this moment. Pow, wake up. So when the Buddha wake up, he's just looking at the morning star. So I always found that he's looking at the morning star, but already if you went to school, you would know, well, that's not a star, it's actually a planet. So what he said, you got enlightenment looking at, by seeing the morning star, that's actually a mistake. But the mistake is a very important mistake, because this is teaching us that it's about experience. It's not about the words that apply to it. So even the words that apply to the Buddha's own enlightenment, the origin of all of Buddha's teaching, when the words come out, it's a mistake. On just a conceptual level, it's a mistake. And talking about it, I mean, everybody has seen the morning star. It's really easy to do. And when you do it, that's it too, for you as an experience. But then you start thinking about it. You might even think, well, that's not a star, that's a planet, right? So then you've gone back into attachment. If you're attached to your judgment mind, then you've lost it. But it's always about returning to it in just this moment. So there's only one moment in your life, and that's this moment. So in the same Diamond Sutra, it says past mind can't get enlightenment, present mind can't get enlightenment, and future mind can't get enlightenment. So what that points to is just this moment. We call it moment world. So moment world is actually you could call it an enlightenment world. Actually, that's your life. But the interesting thing is, the past, you can't get a hold of that. It's gone, right? And the future, well, you can't get a hold of that because it doesn't exist except in science fiction novels. And then this moment, it already went by. So you can't get a hold of it either. So actually, there's nothing to hold on to. It's just your mind that holds on to things. So these 1,700 kongans, or whatever ones you want to make up. I mean, the whole world is a single flower. Our book of kongans has kongans, Christian kongans, Taoist kongans, and Zen kongans, and traditional Korean ones, and some of the 1,700 ones. Those are all just made up to allow you to connect to this moment, which already went by. So even though we call it just now mind, it's also a mistake, because what you truly are is before any of those kind of ideas. So I want to thank you for listening and for attending this conference. Most important is to do some practicing so you can wake up just now and help the world. So thank you for listening.